I wanted to take a few minutes and just give a little bit of analysis on the short story We Ate the Children Last. Of all the short stories we read during this unit, this is probably one of the more uncomfortable and disturbing, but also it can be challenging to really dig into what the message is here. Because on the surface level, it sounds like a story about a strange operation and eventually people eating each other. Those things definitely happen, but we kind of have to mine under the surface a little bit more to get at some of the social commentary that's happening in this story. And in fact, I'd even kind of question whether or not I wanted to read this story because it's a little bit more difficult to interpret. Of course, it's a little bit more disturbing, but really it's just a little bit more difficult to interpret. Nevertheless, I feel like this is a good practice for us with reading comprehension and digging a little bit below the surface to try and interpret some of the more subtle messages and really what's being communicated. So I just wanted to go over a few things in order to bring it to your attention, even though you read the story first and are seeing this on the other end. Now you kind of go through, what were some of your initial thoughts and reactions, and how might some of this additional information maybe help you in interpreting and understanding the story a little bit better. So first of all, when we read through this story, we have to really understand what is satire. And so I've given a hyperlink here if you want to look at it more. But essentially, satire is social commentary uh, meant to exaggerate certain ideas in order to bring important messages to light. Uh, as a case study, some of you may have heard of the author Jonathan Swift. He wrote a classic novel, Gulliver's Travel, which also had a lot of social commentary. But he also wrote an essay called A Modest Proposal, in which, in order to solve some of the problems in his country, in Ireland, related to poverty and limited resources, he suggested that poor families sell their children to rich families as food. Now, again, this is satire. This is disturbing, unsettling, kind of crazy and ridiculous, and but it's satire. Jonathan Swift wasn't literally suggesting that in his country, poor people should start selling their children in order to, raise funds and to provide more edible, consumable resources to the wealthy. Rather, he is trying to highlight the extreme circumstances and kind of the ridiculousness of the treatment of the upper classes towards the lower classes, and also try to motivate some of the lower classes to take action and fight for their own rights. Okay, and so, but it's satire. It's not something that's literal. Likewise, in this story that we've read, which is kind of extreme, there's a lot of satire going on as well, and we start seeing some of these themes uh, that are really social commentary about the situation that's related to society today. So one of those being the treatment of the poor. So in the story, the affluent in society accidentally discover this medical operation, right, by transplanting the stomach of a pig into a human. And on the one hand, it's successful, but then they have this weird secondary symptom, which they realize could be a benefit when the patient then has a diet desiring what is traditionally non-consumable materials like garbage. And all of a sudden they choose, oh, hey, why don't we make the poor people get this operation? Because this will help solve our problem of poverty. They'll consume non-consumable resources that we don't really need, and they'll no longer be taking away from the resources that we do need. And this is a way to kind of like solve the problem of poverty, right? And especially when we think of it in context of Jonathan Swift's Modest Proposal, it starts making more sense, the degree of satire in the story. But not only the treatment of the poor, we see the mob mentality based on viral trends. So for a while, everyone wants this surgery that's going to change their diet. It becomes like the cool thing to do. And so, I mean, it's almost laughable that people, just the trend that develops, that people want this surgery, they want this severe scar as sort of this badge, this symbol of honor, right? And in fact, I linked another article. This was a student journal at a university that addressed this very issue, satirizing the impulsivity of the ignorant mob in Yann Martel's "We Ate the Children Last." So this is something that is evident in the story of just how over the top the mob becomes. But then in the last one here, the treatment of undesirables, how quickly that changes when all of a sudden it is no longer cool or popular to have this procedure. And in fact, the society at large is trying to kind of forget about what happened. All of a sudden, those who have the procedure, the undesirables, my words, not the stories, are left to rot away and consume themselves while the rest of society tries to forget that any of this ever even happened. In fact, the last paragraph of the story, uh, the character addresses that issue, that they're just trying to forget and ignore that any of this ever even happened. And so so we have to understand that satire and a lot of sort of figurative ideas, symbolism in the story. Obviously, a very clear visual representation, symbolism here with the scar itself, and kind of the ridiculousness of certain trends and everything, maybe poking fun of society and the way things go viral, the sort of arbitrary way things can go viral. Also, detainment camps, maybe less symbolic, but at least it helps us to sort of think of other historical examples we have in which people who were not desirable were basically cast away from society. Whether we think of the ghettos of the Jewish in Nazi Germany, the Jewish people in Nazi Germany, whether we think of internment camps in the United States, Japanese and other people during World War II, many events in history in which you think of people being separated from society because they're no longer welcome. And so we can kind of make some of those associations in the story as well. And then also the act of consumption itself. As grotesque as it is, there's actually kind of a clue at the very, very end here that there's more going on to this idea of consumption than just the literal act of eating, because the main character says there's a moral rot in this country that even I can't digest. So if we weren't really keyed in before, all of a sudden we realize that what's happening in the story is very figurative, very symbolic. That there is sort of a moral, ethical dimension to everything that the storyteller is trying to communicate to the readers, and which the association is being made between the consumption of trash and things that are typically not consumable. People who have gotten this procedure will eat anything, but he says that that even the most extreme diets cannot stomach the sort of moral rot that has taken place because of the treatment of people in this society, in this culture, and the things that have gone on. And yes, as grotesque as it is to consider people literally eating themselves, again, it becomes more of a satirical, symbolic statement about the ways in which people who are no longer wanted in society are left without provisions until they eventually consume themselves, and the people who no longer want to kind of really think about the people in bad circumstances can just forget about it and just ignore that even happens. In fact, there's a lot of connection between that idea of simply ignoring and forgetting about the bad things in society, for those who have everything that they need, have the resources, are privileged to not necessarily be in these dire situations. We find some connections between that and this story, "We Ate the Children Last," with the story Amalas that we're also reading as well. So a little bit of background, hopefully a little bit more context that kind of helps us dig deeper into some of the messages in this bizarre story that is actually meant to give acute social awareness about issues that happen today, even if not quite as outlandish as it's presented in this story.